The cop shows on TV, police shows, you'll hear them using 10 codes. 1020 means what's your location. 10-4, I've copied your message and I understand it. And so we're gonna use some of those 10 codes. And my radio call sign was 1700, and her call sign at our cabin was on Zaskus. And so I'm in my truck, and I'm starting back when I hear.
I'm Zaskus, 1700.
10-3, go ahead.
1020.
I've left Ashland and I've just passed the 6-mile North Main Woods checkpoint.
When I start the gas generator to turn on the camp lights, I can hear gunshots coming from Priestley Mountain Way. I think someone might be lost.
Okay, I'm about an hour and a half away. Turn off the generator, wait a few minutes, and restart to see if you can hear shots again. 10 minutes later, I hear Sue calling over the radio.
I'm Zaskus, 1700.
Go ahead.
I've restarted the generator. When the lights flipped on, I could hear 3 distinct shots as before.
10-4, sounds like a lost hunter. He must be able to see the glow from the lights. Keep the generator running so he'll see the camp lit up and hopefully stay put. I expect he'll keep shooting. I'll hurry us along as fast as I can. What's the outside temperature?
The thermometer reads 38 degrees, and there is a light wind coming from across the lake.
70 minutes later, I drive into the yard where Susan meets me at the door with the announcement.
I'm still hearing shots, Tim. I'm worried. Due to the echoing, I can't tell what direction the sounds are coming from.
Okay, I'm going to take my rifle down to the lakeshore and fire into the air. If someone responds, then I'll use my compass to pinpoint their direction. Once I'm on shore, I'll holler for you to shut off the generator. Then I'll yell when I want it restarted. Without another word, I grabbed my rifle, and once outside, I loaded the 30-30 carbine with 3 cartridges. Pulling my compass from my shirt pocket, and under the glow of the cabin lights, I walked down a stone path to the shore. The wind is out of the northeast, and in the dark, I can hear waves splashing along the shoreline. The wind intensifies. I holler for Susan to turn on the lights. Immediately, I hear 3 distinct rifle shots being carried by the wind directly from across the lake. The cold penetrates the thickness of my winter coat. In the distance, I hear the howls of a lynx filling the air. I fire 3 shots. Walking back to camp, I say to Susan, the sounds are coming from across the lake a little over a mile away, just north of the old Pocket settlement. There is too, someone's lost. There aren't any logging roads in that area, so I'll get my canoe and outboard motor out of winter storage and cross over. Can you prepare a thermos of hot coffee and dig out some of our extra clothing? If I can find whoever's over there, he's apt to be cold. I'm gonna fuel up the outboard's gas can and grab an extra life jacket.
I'm going with you.
Turning to make eye contact, I said, I don't think that's a good idea. It's cold, the wind is picking up, I could get in trouble, and I don't want you to be in danger.
Thanks. But you may have problems if I don't go. You don't know what you're going to find when you get there. What if whoever it is has a broken leg and can't walk, or is having a heart attack? Besides, you'll need weight in the front of the canoe to keep the bow down in the wind. And I can shine the flashlight on the distant shore so you don't run into a floating log or rock. I understand your concern, but it is best if I go with you.
Okay, you're right. We'll leave the porch lights on to mark our return. 2 weeks before, I'd stored my canoe and motor a half-mile down the road in an old garage that once belonged to the Maine Forest Service. So once dressed and with the necessary supplies, we drove my pickup to the building to retrieve the 20-foot canoe. There, we carried the heavy aluminum craft 60 feet to the shore. While I attached the 10-horse outboard to the canoe's side motor mount and hooked the motor to the gas can, Susan filled the canoe with an extra canoe chair, a dry bag of clothing, hot coffee, and life jackets. After the canoe was ready to launch, I drove the 4x4 to the lake shore and parked the idling vehicle so the truck's headlights pointed diagonally towards the north. While Sue was zipping up her flotation coat, pulling a wool hat low over her ears, and slipping into the leather insulated mittens, she asked,
"Why are the headlight beamed north? I thought the shots came from an area more to the east."
"They did, but coming back we'll be using the lights of our truck as our beacon. If the beams are pointed directly at us, we'll be blinded by the intense light and have a hard time seeing." Pushing the canoe in the water till the front end was floating, I straddled the stern's aluminum deck with my feet firmly planted on the ground along both sides of the canoe. Sue stepped into the center of the steadied craft and walked balanced beam fashion to the front seat. After she was seated, I placed my left foot in front of the canoe's rear seat and with my right pushed us off into the darkness. 10 feet from shore, I lowered the motor, squeezed the rubber ball on the gas line, and after the third pull of an engine's rewind, the motor purred to life. Susan kept the shaft of a light from a 5-cell flashlight shining over the front of the canoe. With my left hand on the motor's throttle, I held my compass and flashlight in my right and headed into the wind. Every so often checking my compass to ensure we were traveling due east. Waves slapped against the bow of the metal canoe and the flashlight broke the darkness. I could see swirling flakes of forecasting a storm. After 15 minutes, Susan turned her head slightly sideways so I could hear her over the noise of the wind and the motor and loudly said,
"The wind's picking up, and it's snowing harder."
"Okay." With the increased blow, I could see Susan moving teeter-totter fashion with each rise and fall of the bow as the outboard forced the canoe to ride over each wave. 30 minutes later, Susan hollered again.
"Tim, I just saw a flash of light."
I eased back on the outboard throttle, just enough to keep the canoe moving forward so she and I could talk. "Where?" I asked.
With my right hand, I pointed southeast of our travel line. The snow off to our left intensified. We both shivered, not as much from the cold, but from the fact we may be getting to whoever was out there in time.
I steered the craft to the right and noticed the new reading on my compass. Moving slowly with the side-to-side rocking of the canoe, we soon saw another blaze of light directly ahead. The flash died almost as soon as it appeared. Within a minute, there was a third blaze and a fourth when my wife announced,
"Go easy, I can see rocks on shore."
Throttling the outboard back to an idle, the front of the canoe soon screeched onto a flat rock at the shoreline. The water offshore was deep enough so my motor didn't touch bottom, so I shifted the engine into neutral and left it idling. Susan stepped onto shore and straddled the bow of the canoe. I walked up to center and stepped out onto dry ground and with a bow rope tied the canoe to a nearby tree. Immediately, a 6-foot-tall man carrying a rifle stepped out of the brush. Hatless, he was a big man, weighing over 200 pounds and only wearing one glove. His red wool hunting coat was soaking wet from exertion. His breath came in rapid fashion, and even though he was perspiring, the man shook from the cold. Shivering uncontrollably, it was difficult for him to speak. Stammering, he panicked, "I'm glad to see you. I'm way cold and can barely walk." And then he stated, "I'm getting into the canoe." And in an effort to slow him down, I asked, "What's your name? Are you alone? Are you hurt?" He stared, not understanding, as I waited for an answer. I visually surveyed for any sign of injury or sign of a heart attack. While I was checking for any obvious wounds, a hypothermic man attempted to step around me and climb over the side of the canoe, nearly tipping our watery vehicle over. I grabbed his arm and commanded, "Wait a minute. You're chilled to the bone. Let's get you into some dry clothing. It will be colder once we're on the water." "What's your name?" I asked again. "I'm Frank," he replied. While Frank was taking off his wet coat, Susan opened our waterproof bag and pulled out a winter jacket, wool hat, and insulated gloves. "Nice to meet you, Frank. I'm Tim. This is Susan. You're gonna be okay. Just slow down. We'll get you back to our cabin and to some hot food." We'll take care of you. Everything's gonna be all right. I encouraged. Once he was dressed, Susan opened the thermos and poured Frank a cup of coffee and cautioned,
Drink slowly. The coffee is very hot. The man's hand shook so badly that he nearly spilled half the cup of the hot brew before he could take a sip.
while she was helping him, I took the man's rifle and checked the chamber for cartridges. There was one 30-06 bullet left in the magazine, and the safety was off. I ejected the bullet and turned on the gun safety. I knew it wouldn't do to have a gun discharge in a canoe at night on a windy lake in a snowstorm in November. After Frank finished his coffee, we helped him into a life jacket and carefully assisted him into the wooden seat with firm instructions. Sit down and don't move.
I'll keep the canoe stable, Tim. Go ahead and climb in. Once Tim was seated, I stepped 1 foot into the canoe and with my right hand pushed the craft away from shore, turned and reclaimed my bow seat. As the canoe moved away, Tim shifted the outboard motor into reverse and back into the darkness. Steering the canoe towards the opposite shore, the snow was falling so heavy we couldn't see the pickup lights that we knew lie directly ahead. So my husband took a new compass bearing. In about 25 minutes, the storm let up enough so that we could see the headlights of the truck, and eventually we were able to pick out the warm glow of our porch lights.
Arriving back at the pickup, I ran the canoe onto the sandy beach and shut off the outboard. Frank was so cold and so stiff, we had to help him stand up and step out of the canoe. On firm ground, he nearly collapsed. 10 minutes later, we arrived back at our warm cabin.
With instructions that Frank should take a hot shower in order to warm up, I immediately began heating up chicken stew and making hot biscuits and fresh pot of coffee. While waiting for everything to cook, I dug out fresh, dry clothing for the man to wear. A few minutes later, over supper, Frank explained that in the excitement of finding a fresh deer track, he had gotten turned around in the woods and had walked several miles the wrong way. So I asked, "We spotted you by the short flashes of light. Were you burning something? Something to get our attention?"
Frank answered yes. The only dry thing I had in my wallet, my money. And you arrived just in time because I just burnt my last bill.